Picture this. It's April 3rd, 1860. A young man, barely 20 years old, sits on a nervous Mustang at the edge of St. Joseph, Missouri. In his leather saddlebag, sealed in oiled silk, are 79 letters, 5 private telegrams, and several special editions of Eastern newspapers. His destination? Sacramento, California, nearly 2,000 miles away. His deadline? 10 days. It was impossible. Everyone knew it was impossible. The fastest stagecoach took 24 days to cover the same distance. Most freight wagons took months. But impossible or not, at exactly 7:15 that evening, as a crowd of onlookers cheered and a brass band played, that young rider kicked his horse and disappeared into the darkness. The Pony Express had begun. This is the story of one of the most audacious and shortest-lived enterprises in American history. A relay system that covered 1,966 miles using teenage boys, half-wild horses, and pure determination. An operation that lost massive amounts of money, lasted only 18 months, and became one of the most legendary symbols of the American West. Because sometimes the greatest stories aren't about what succeeds. They're about what dares to try. In 1860, California had been a state for nearly 10 years. The gold rush had brought hundreds of thousands of settlers. San Francisco was a booming city, but California remained separated from the rest of the United States by 2,000 miles of mountains, deserts, and Native American territory. Communication was painfully slow. A letter sent from New York to California could take anywhere from 21 days to several months, depending on the route. The sea route around Cape Horn, the southern tip of South America, took 5 to 8 months. It was reliable, but glacially slow. The Panama route was faster, about 3 weeks, but required crossing the Isthmus of Panama on foot through disease-ridden jungle. Yellow fever and malaria killed regularly. And during busy seasons, mail could sit in Panama for weeks waiting for a ship. The overland route via stagecoach took about 24 days under ideal conditions. But ideal conditions were rare. Bad weather, breakdowns, and occasional raids could delay the mail for weeks. For California businessmen, this was intolerable. Stock prices, news of Eastern markets, political developments, everything arrived weeks after it mattered. More importantly, California was politically unstable. The state contained many Southern sympathizers. With tensions rising between North and South, the federal government desperately needed faster communication with the Pacific Coast. A solution was needed. Something faster. Something that could cut the time in half. Enter William H. Russell. William Russell was a freight company owner with a reputation for bold, some would say reckless, business ventures. He and his partners, Alexander Majors and William Waddell, ran the Central Overland California and Pikes Peak Express Company. It was a mouthful of a name for a company that was quietly bleeding money. Russell believed that fast mail delivery could save the company. More than that, it could secure a lucrative government mail contract. The federal government paid handsomely for reliable mail service, and Russell wanted that contract. His plan was audacious. Create a relay system of horse-mounted riders covering 1,966 miles from St. Joseph, Missouri to Sacramento, California. Each rider would cover 75 to 100 miles before handing off the mail to a fresh rider. Each rider would change horses every 10 to 15 miles at small relay stations. The goal, 10 days from Missouri to California. His partners thought he was insane. Alexander Majors later wrote that he opposed the plan from the start, calling it a wild scheme. William Waddell was equally skeptical, but Russell was determined. In January 1860, just 3 months before the scheduled launch, he announced the Pony Express to the world. 3 months to build 190 relay stations across 2,000 miles of frontier. 3 months to purchase 500 horses. 3 months to hire 80 riders willing to risk their lives for low pay. 3 months to establish supply lines, hire station keepers, and coordinate one of the most complex logistics operations ever attempted. Somehow, they did it. The route ran from St. Joseph, Missouri, the westernmost point connected by telegraph in 1860, across Kansas, Nebraska, Wyoming, Utah, Nevada, and into California. Roughly 190 stations were established. The stations came in two types: relay stations and home stations. Relay stations were simple affairs, often just a crude shack or dugout with a corral. A station keeper lived there alone, his only job to have fresh horses ready at all times. These stations were spaced every 10 to 15 miles. A rider would gallop in, leap off his exhausted horse, throw the mail pouch, called a mochila, onto a fresh mount, and gallop away. The exchange took less than 2 minutes. Home stations were larger facilities spaced 75 to 100 miles apart. These had sleeping quarters, meals, and multiple station keepers. This was where riders ended their run and handed off to a fresh rider. The stations themselves ranged from substantial buildings in settled areas to crude dugouts on the open plains. Some were existing stage stations, others were built from scratch in weeks. In the most remote areas, across Nevada's 40-mile desert through Utah's salt flats, stations were desperate places. Mud huts dug into hillsides, sod houses with dirt floors. Water had to be hauled from miles away. Food consisted of whatever could be preserved: salt pork, beans, dried beef, hardtack. Station keepers lived in isolation, often alone, sometimes for weeks without seeing another human except the riders who thundered past every few days. The loneliness was profound. The danger was constant, because the stations weren't just remote. Many sat in territory controlled by Native American tribes who viewed the Pony Express stations as invasions of their land. The Pony Express purchased approximately 500 horses. These weren't the massive draft horses that pulled wagons. These were small, tough Mustangs, many barely larger than ponies, bred for endurance and speed. Most were purchased from local ranchers for $100 to $200 each, significant money at the time. In California, they bought horses from Californios, Mexican ranchers whose stock traced back to Spanish horses. These animals knew the desert. They knew how to survive on sparse water and tough grasses. In the Midwest, they bought Morgan horses, a compact, powerful American breed known for stamina. In the Rocky Mountains, they sought Mustangs that could handle altitude and steep terrain. Each relay station kept 3 to 5 horses. Each horse would run once, maybe twice a week, depending on the mail schedule. They needed that much rest. A full-speed run of 10 to 15 miles could wreck a horse if done too frequently. The riders pushed the horses hard, very hard, running at full gallop across open prairie, climbing mountain passes, crossing river fords in the dark. These horses worked at the absolute limit of what was sustainable. And when a horse broke down mid-run, which happened regularly, the rider had to improvise. Walk. Run alongside the exhausted animal. Somehow reach the next station. The genius of the Pony Express wasn't just the route or the horses. It was the mochila. The mochila was a leather saddle cover with 4 pockets, called cantinas, sewn into the corners. It fit over the saddle with a hole for the saddle horn and could be thrown from one horse to another in seconds. 3 of the cantinas were locked. Only station masters at the endpoints, St. Joseph and Sacramento, had keys. This prevented theft and ensured riders couldn't access the mail. The 4th cantina was unlocked for letters picked up or delivered at intermediate stations. The mail itself was written on the thinnest tissue paper available. Letters were charged $5 per half ounce, equivalent to about $150 today. It was expensive, which meant only important correspondence went via Pony Express. Each mochila weighed about 15 pounds when full. Combined with the rider's weight and a light saddle, the total load rarely exceeded 165 pounds. Every ounce mattered when asking a horse to maintain speed for 10 miles. The Pony Express advertisement is legendary, though historians debate whether it actually ran in quite this form. Wanted. Young, skinny, wiry fellows not over 18. Must be expert riders willing to risk death daily. Orphans preferred. Whether or not that exact ad ran, it captured the reality perfectly. The Pony Express hired approximately 80 riders. Most were between 18 and 25 years old. Some were younger, as young as 11 in a few cases. They needed to weigh less than 125 pounds to keep the load on the horses manageable. The pay was $100 to $150 per month, good money compared to cowboys who made $25 to $40 monthly. But the job was exponentially more dangerous. Each rider covered 75 to 100 miles per run, about one-third of the distance across their home territory. They rode day or night, regardless of weather. They rode when they were sick. They rode when they were injured. The mail didn't stop. William Cody, later famous as Buffalo Bill, started riding for the Pony Express at age 14. His typical run was 76 miles. On one legendary occasion when the relief rider was killed, Cody rode 322 miles without rest, using 21 horses. Whether that story is true or embellished, it captured the expectation. You rode until you physically couldn't. The riders carried almost nothing. A light saddle, the mochila, a revolver and knife for protection, a small water canteen, a horn to announce their arrival at stations. That was it. No food, no bedroll, no extra clothes. Weight was the enemy. The inaugural run began on April 3, 1860, with simultaneous departures from St. Joseph, Missouri, heading west, and Sacramento, California, heading east. In St. Joseph, a crowd of onlookers gathered to watch the first rider depart. The mayor gave a speech. A brass band played. At 7:15 p.m., the first rider, some sources say it was Johnny Fry, others debate this, galloped away into the darkness. The mail reached Sacramento on April 13th, exactly 10 days later. It was a miracle. Everyone knew it was a miracle. The news spread across the country. Newspapers proclaimed the achievement. California celebrated. The Pony Express had proven it could be done. But that first run had been in early April. Good weather, clear trails, no complications. Reality was about to get much harder. The Pony Express operated through conditions that would close modern highways. Winter in the Sierra Nevada could drop 10 feet of snow in a single storm. Riders crossed mountain passes in blizzards, following trails by instinct when visibility dropped to feet. Some stations became completely snowed in for weeks. Summer in Nevada meant crossing 40-mile stretches of desert where temperatures reached 120 degrees. Water stations were spaced at the maximum distance a horse could survive. Riders wrapped wet cloths around their heads. Horses died of heat exhaustion. Flash floods could turn dry creek beds into raging torrents in minutes. Riders had to judge whether to wait and miss the schedule or risk the crossing and possibly drown. But the greatest danger came from the Paiute War of 1860. The Paiute Nation had watched with growing alarm as white settlers invaded their territory. The Pony Express stations, built without permission on Paiute land, were particularly offensive. These permanent structures represented permanent occupation. In May 1860, just 1 month after the Pony Express began, the Paiute attacked. They destroyed 16 stations across Nevada. They killed station keepers. They ran off the horses. They burned buildings to the ground. The Pony Express was forced to shut down for a month while stations were rebuilt and protected. The company hired armed guards. They fortified stations. The costs mounted. When service resumed in June, riders knew that at any moment they might ride into an ambush. The stress was constant. The Pony Express was an engineering marvel. It was also a financial catastrophe. The initial investment was enormous, building 190 stations, purchasing 500 horses, hiring 80 riders plus station keepers, establishing supply lines across 2,000 miles. Conservative estimates put the startup costs at $100,000, equivalent to $3 million today. Operating costs were equally staggering. Monthly expenses exceeded $30,000. That's feeding and housing station keepers, replacing worn-out horses, paying riders, maintaining buildings, replacing stations destroyed by raids. Revenue? Pathetically small. At $5 per half ounce, they needed massive mail volume to break even. But most businesses and individuals continued using the cheaper overland mail. Only the most urgent correspondence went via Pony Express. During its 18-month operation, the Pony Express probably carried fewer than 35,000 pieces of mail. Even at premium prices, that wasn't nearly enough. Russell had bet everything on securing a government mail contract. The federal government paid substantial subsidies to reliable mail carriers. If the Pony Express could prove its reliability, they'd win the contract and the financial problems would disappear. But the government never awarded the contract. They simply watched, waited, and enjoyed the fast mail delivery without paying for it. By late 1861, Russell's freight company was collapsing under massive debts. The Pony Express was hemorrhaging money with no prospect of profitability. And then, technology made the whole operation obsolete. While the Pony Express riders galloped across the plains, telegraph crews were stringing wire. The transcontinental telegraph had been under construction since 1860, working from both coasts toward a meeting point in Salt Lake City. By October 1861, the lines connected. A message that took 10 days by Pony Express now took minutes by telegraph. The Pony Express made its final run on October 24th, 1861. There was no ceremony, no speeches. The riders simply stopped riding. 18 months. That was it. From launch to shutdown, one of the most famous operations in American history lasted a year and a half. The financial losses were catastrophic. Russell's company went bankrupt. Some estimates put the total losses at $500,000, equivalent to $15 million today. Russell himself was financially ruined. Most of the riders scattered to other occupations. Some joined the Union or Confederate armies in the Civil War that had just begun. Some became scouts, guides, or lawmen. A few, like Buffalo Bill Cody, turned their Pony Express service into legendary careers. The horses were sold off. The stations were abandoned or repurposed. Within a few years, wind and weather began erasing the physical traces of the operation. By any business metric, the Pony Express was a complete failure. So why do we remember it? The Pony Express failed as a business, but it succeeded as something more important, a symbol. It proved that the impossible could be done, that with enough determination, creativity, and courage, humans could overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles. During its brief operation, the Pony Express delivered critical news. Lincoln's inaugural address reached California via Pony Express. Early news of the Civil War traveled by those riders. California's decision to remain with the Union, a decision that shaped American history, was influenced by the rapid communication the Pony Express provided. The riders became legends precisely because what they did seemed impossible. Riding 75 miles through darkness, crossing flooded rivers, navigating snowstorms, continuing when exhausted, injured, or sick, all to deliver mail that most people could have sent more cheaply by stagecoach. That's what we remember. Not the financial failure, not the brief operational period. We remember the audacity, the determination, the teenage boys who wrote into history because someone told them they could deliver mail in 10 days and they believed it. But we've only told half the story. Who were these riders, really? What were their most legendary runs? What happened when everything went wrong? And how did this 18-month operation create a mythology that would last for over a century? That's part 2. And trust me, the stories only get wilder. The Pony Express, 1,966 miles in 10 days. For 18 months, it was the fastest communication in America. And for over a century afterward, it remained the ultimate symbol of frontier determination.